So let's get started. So last time we went over a few ways to design hardware IP blocks, right? So you can actually write your own Verilog code, or you could also use HLS. The idea was we can write C code and you compile it, and actually that will be translated into RTL. So there are multiple different ways to develop these like IP block, right? And then we moved on to the interconnect, right? So the last thing we covered was something like this. We actually have a bunch of IP blocks, placed on your design, and then they must be interconnected with each other. And there is some industry standard interconnect called AXI, Advanced Extensible Interface, so which is developed by ARM. So we actually have some interconnects here, connecting a bunch of like modules to communicate with each other. So here, for example, this is AXI bus. Okay. In this specific example, maybe master could be a CPU with a cache, the CPU, and maybe slave is some like a memory. So if you have cache miss, then the request must be forwarded to the memory controller, so that actually the memory controller, issue a request to the DRAM to read like a certain like a requested block from DRAM, right? So here, that's the interconnects that connecting this like a master and slave here, and in this like a specific like a standard AXI. So this is in a sense this one is kind of another block, right? So this one is the AXI interconnects here, and this one is master, and this one is slave. So in a sense, this AXI interconnect serves as a slave from this like a master's viewpoint, because this one actually send the request, then this actually interconnect receives the request, right? Buffer it, right? And then this interconnect actually forward the request to the slave. So on this side, this AXI interconnect serves as a master, right? On behalf of the original master, right? So it actually received the request from master and buffer it, and then it actually forward this request to the slave. So from like this side, this AXI interconnect serves as a master, bus master, right? Because it's sending, and this one becomes slave, right? So and depending on the configuration, maybe various different pair. Any pair of this master and slave can communicate with each other. So that's the idea of having this like a central interconnect or bus. And if this is another view of the same thing. CPU, the master is placed here, and slave is here, and this DRAM is attached to slave. Of course, this one is a chip. This is chip boundary. Let's say if you have a zinc or some FPGA, then this is chip boundary. So everything is placed on chip up to here, and then this one is actually placed off chip because it is soldered on the board, right? So this is master, slave, and this is interconnect. If there's cache miss, let's say for example you're executing load instruction, load some value from address 100, then you first check whether the block is available in the cache, right? If it hits, then actually the data comes immediately from this cache. But if it misses, then the request will be forwarded to the bus, and eventually it reaches this like memory controller, right? And then this memory controller, basically translate this request into a bunch of like a row and column requests in a DRAM, because I don't know how many of you actually know the internals of DRAM, but DRAM actually has like a two-dimensional set array. So you actually have to first select like a specific row. So it's called activation. So you need to first activate like a specific row, and then you request like a specific column within this row. So this first command is called activation. So activation is basically selecting specific row, and this one, the second request is a read. So in this case, you actually read like a specific column within this row. Okay. So maybe it's let's say it takes like a 15 nanosecond per each. Then it takes like a 30 like a nanosecond to read like read one block, and this one will come back with some like overhead from this like a bus and masters and arbitration, all these things. Then the latency is something like maybe 40 to 50 nanoseconds. Okay? So if you run like a 1 gigahertz processor, it corresponds to 40 to 50 clock cycles, because in wall clock time, it takes like a 40 to 50 nanoseconds. But if you have like 1 gigahertz CPU, then it's one clock cycle is basically 1 nanosecond, right? So it's translated to 40 to 50 CPU clock cycles. So the cost is pretty big, right? Because whenever you have cache miss, it'll be stalled for like 40 to 50 clock cycles, and then the data comes back, right? So that was the idea. And I talk about this like a standard a little bit, split transaction. Basically, this AXI standard, we have 5 different channels, as shown in this figure. So there are 5 different channels. Include this like a write address / control channel, and write data channel, and response channel. Response is like a hand acknowledgement. So whenever you try to write something, you actually send like address and data to the slave, right? And then after this writing is done, the slave actually returns acknowledgement. Oh, it's okay. Everything was fine. It's finished. Okay. So this response channel actually sends like an acknowledgement. So whether everything was okay, or maybe there was some problem, that actually sends an error message back to the master. The master will actually retry this write transaction and so on. Okay. So actually there are 3 channels used for write transaction, and there are 2 channels for read transaction. The first one is read address and control, and second one is read data. So in the first phase, the master actually sends like read command with address, right? And the slave receive this information, and then you basically read internally read like a specific blocks or some like access memory or access BRAM, whatever it does, and then it actually returns this data back to the master. Okay, so it actually takes 2 channels, one for actually sending the address and control, and second one actually to read data. By the way, note this like a direction of the channel, because the first one, when you actually write something, then this address and data, flows from master to slave, right? Because master is responsible for providing this address and data. So in this case, these 2 channels actually have like this direction, from master to slave, right? But in contrast, this like acknowledgement actually comes in the opposite direction, right? Because it's like slave's responsibility to send acknowledgement. So in this case, this channel is actually flows in this way. Likewise, if you actually do some like read transaction, it's master's responsibility to send like a read address, right? So this channel actually flows in this direction, and the data actually comes from slave to master, so actually it goes the opposite direction. Okay. And what I mean by split transaction is that, let's say you want to do some read, right? Then you actually first send like the idea of like split transaction is these like operation of the 3 channels can be arbitrarily interleaved, meaning that in like a split transaction, you actually send a request, maybe by sending like an address. Let's say you want to do some read, then maybe this guy actually sends some read request using this channel. Then maybe the slave device is very slow, maybe something like this. 문 닫았어요? 뭐 지금 소독하는 거예요? Okay. Yeah. So where were we? So okay. So the master actually sends like address, right? Read address. Then eventually this data will come back. But maybe this like a slave device, maybe really slow device, something like maybe USB or SD card. It's actually pretty slow. SD card it takes a long time to read. So maybe there on the slave side, maybe there's very slow device. Then there can be very like a long interval gap between the read request and read response, right? Then it's very wasteful for this request to block the entire bus, right? So we actually separate it. So let's say the first master actually sends like a request, and let's say there may be like it takes a long time to finish the request. Then like other pairs of transactions can come in between. So that's the idea of a split transaction. So request and reply can be split. So and then there can be some arbitrary pairs of requests can come in between the 2. So that's the idea of a split transaction. And the opposite is non-split transaction. So in case of non-split transaction, and once this like a request is initiated, this bus is completely blocked until the request comes, the reply comes back. Okay, that's like a non-split, transaction, which is kind of wasteful, especially if you like a slave device is really slow. Then maybe this bus will be blocked for a long time, so it actually blocks the the other like IPs from communicating from each other. Okay, that's the benefits of a split transaction. Of course, there can be some like overhead because you need to now you have to handle like a multiple outstanding transactions at the same time. So you need to somehow distinguish which request is actually paired with which reply. You actually have to some way, there must be some way to pair this request and reply. Okay. So this is a split transaction. So as I said, if you do like a split transaction right, the first phase, the master sends like an address/control, and it also sends data. Master gives data to the slave, and then after all this writing is done, the slave actually replies. Slave acknowledges everything was fine, or maybe there was an error, and so on. For like a read transaction is more or less same, except for the direction of the data, because in this case, the master only sends like a request, the address, right? And then slave actually provides the data back to the master. So the master issues address, and slave returns data. Okay, so like this is like a high-level operation of AXI bus. So let's take a look. Let's dive into details of how this like AXI bus works by looking at this AXI protocol. By the way, last time we actually I got some feedback from like you guys. What's the most difficult part? And one of the comments was, it's very difficult to follow because we don't have standard textbook or reference. Okay, there's one point like several students raised. So I'll try to include these references whenever possible, because this course itself is kind of took the materials from all over the place. Very different, wide variety of like materials. So it's very hard to pin down just one like reference. Sorry for that, but I can actually give you some like a reference whenever possible. I can give you some like a textbook or something you can read. Or I can post it. If it's available online, I can post it in the ETL so that you can actually take a look. So, for like AXI protocol, for example, there's like a standard like a specification, like AXI protocol specification, like this thick, but we only takes like very small like a fraction of the textbook, so it's kind of maybe it's very like intimidating for you guys, but. Maybe it may be helpful for some of you guys, so I'll actually let you know where you can actually get this standard from. Okay. All right. So let's move on. AXI protocol. So as I said, AXI architecture has like 5 different channels: write to address, write data, and write response. These 3 channels are used for write transaction. The remaining 2 are used for read. Okay, read address and read data. So as you see here, it's like more or less the same as before. The master first sends this like address/control. By the way, /control is it's basically specifying how many bytes you want to read and what's like a mode of operation. All the metadata will be sent together. Okay, so that's you see the details in the later slides. So address/control. Once you actually send master first send this address/control. And then, also data, and then, this slave will reply with response. And in case of read, it sends like a address/control, and then after some like a delay, this slave will provide this data. So that's basically how we use these 5 channels. And the AXI protocol support like what is called burst transaction. Burst transaction. So burst transaction means you just send like one address and you receive like a multiple pieces of data. That's like a burst, right? So in like a typical like access pattern, we access like a multiple like bytes sequentially, right? You actually so it's just, let's say in this specific example, let's say you want to read like these 4 like bytes. Let's say one box actually shows 1 byte. Then in this case, we want to read like a 4 bytes here, right? D like 11 through D14, like the address like 11 through 14. But you know, if your protocol does not support like a burst, then you actually have to put all these like address into the bus. A11, A12, address 13, address 14, right? So actually this one corresponds to this data, and this one corresponds to this data, and this one corresponds to this data. If there's no burst, right? But this AMBA bus, you know, this AXI standard support like a burst transaction. The idea was you only send the first address, the starting address, and send like a length, burst length. Then, you know, this address will be internally, this like a slave will internally calculate this address to read like a 4, you know, bytes for this single request. And for the second request, maybe, so in this case, let's say burst length is 3. Burst length, in this case, burst length is 4 actually. So burst length is 4. So when you actually, you just send like one address, but the 4 pieces of data will come back. Okay? In this case, you know, burst length is BL is 3 because, you know, this actually sends like one address, but, you know, the 3, you know, bytes of data come back, right? So in this case, the burst length is 3. So master provides a start address of a burst, and also like, as well as like burst length. And slave needs to generate the remaining addresses based on the burst type. Okay, so there are 3 like burst types. The first one is, this one's like increment, like increment. The increment means you, whenever for like a next like a, you know, next like a transfer, you increment the address by 1. That's called an increment, INCR. And there's another one, could be like a fixed. The fixed is basically you read data from the same location again and again. So in this case, if you actually do, if your mode was like a fixed, it would be like something like this: D11 followed by D11 followed by D11 followed by D11. Four pieces of D11 will come back if you actually specify this fixed burst type. Then what's the point? Why need to do this? When this one can be useful? 똑같은 로케이션에서 데이터를 4번 읽어와요. When this one can be useful? Any guess? 문자열 데이터 읽어올 때 똑같은 로케이션에서 읽어오는 거? 카운터를 그러면은 그 카운터는 누가 업데이트 하는데요? 타이머. 맞아요. 예, 좋은 example이네요. 제가 생각했던 example은 아닌데, also a very good example. Yes, that's true. Maybe this location could be a counter, timer, right? Then actually whenever you read from the same location, the value actually is changed, right? Because it's timer. You know, every computer system actually has clock in it. You know, there's some timer. So whenever you read some like, to generalize it, it's called memory mapped I/O. So let's say that location is actually memory mapped I/O. Then actually you read some like value, which is actually updated by some like IP, maybe timer. Right? So in this case, you actually read this one actually four times consecutively. The timer value will get changed. So all these things, even though they actually read from the same location, the value will be different. Okay. So that's like one example. So I get this example of a fixed thing. And this wraparound is kind of another example. Wraparound is, let's say you actually read. So let's use the same example. Let's say burst length is 4, and maybe the better example here. So wraparound is something like this. So you know what is alignment, right? Alignment is basically if you actually read like a word, then the byte address of the word must be aligned, must be a multiple of 4, assuming like the word is like 4 bytes, right? So if you actually but let's say you want to read a word. Let's say read word whose byte address is somewhere between, you know, data, let's say 04 through 07. Okay, this is like a word, like a second word in your memory space, right? The first word actually from 0 through 01, 02, 03. So it is like a first word, and second word is 4, 5, 6, 7, like 4 bytes, right? So let's say you want to read like this data, and then you send your request starting from A06. And your like burst type is wraparound. So what's going to happen? Any guess? What's going to happen here? So let's say you have like a data channel here. This is data channel. This one is like address channel. So in burst length is 4 because we want to read a word. Then what will be the order of data transfer here? Like this. Let's say data starts coming here. The first one, hint is the first data is like a 06. Okay. So what's going to happen in the next cycle? If you actually run it like a wrap mode. So first one actually is 06, and second one is 07. What will be the third one? 07. So wrap means you actually wrap around the word. So in this case, this in your address space, word is actually aligned at the multiple 4, like in byte address, right? So in this case, you actually request a specific like word. So the next one will be in this case. Next one will be 04 followed by 05. That's wraparound mode. Okay. So the point is, you actually want to read a word, and you give an address in the middle of the word, right? Then actually you actually read it first mode. First type is wrap. Then you start from that like a byte address, and then you after you reach the end of the word, and you wrap around to the beginning of the word to read the remaining like bytes. That's called a wraparound. 네. 맞아요. 맞습니다. 예. 그 벌스트 랭스가 의미가 있죠. 그러니까 벌스트 랭스가 벌스 랭스에 의해서 이게 결국은 사이즈가 얼라이먼트가 결정이 되는 거니까요. 그러니까 예를 들면은 캐시라인을 읽어온다고 그러면은 캐시라인 같은 게 64바이트거든요. 그럼 예를 들면 그 64바이트라는 거를 이제 그 벌스 랭스가 스페시파이 해야 되니까 이제 거기 그 전체 트랜스퍼하는 양에 맞춰가지고 그 블럭 단위로 예를 들면 얼라이먼트를 놓는다고 했을 때 이제 거기에서 이제 그 바운더리에서 랩라운드 하는 거죠. 벌스 랭스가 의미가 없지 않죠. 그러니까 전체 예를 들면 트랜스퍼 하는 양이 하나의 그냥 단위라고 했을 때, 이 전체 읽어오는 단위라고 했을 때, 그 바운더리에 도달하면 이제 다시 처음으로 돌아오는 이런 식으로 되게 됩니다. 오케이? 네. 그렇죠. 벌스 랭스는 사실 3으로 줄 수가 없어요. 왜냐하면 여기 다음 페이지 있는데, 다음 페이지가 아니구나. 벌스 랭스는 항상 2의 n승으로만 나가요. 벌스 사이즈. 벌스 랭스. 벌스 사이즈. 벌스 랭스 3으로 줄 수 있어요. 3으로 줄 수 있는데, 그런 경우에 사실 이게 벌스 사이즈하고 벌스 랭스 두 개가 있는데, 벌스 사이즈는 한 트랜스퍼에 몇 바이트를 보낼 건가가 벌스 사이즈고요. 그다음에 벌스 랭스는 그거를 몇 번 반복할 건데, 제 생각에는 일단은 여기 벌스 사이즈하고 벌스 랭스를 설명한 다음에 다시 그 문제로 다시 돌아올게요. Like a ID of the transaction. Then to implement like a split transaction, you need to basically using like this, like a tag, like this, like an ID. You actually match like a request and reply. Okay, so that's actually this wire is actually used for is like matching between master and it's like a request and response when you actually implement like a split transaction. But if you don't really want to use like a split transaction, or there's some other way to disambiguate, so there's some other ways to pair, pair of like a request and reply, then you don't really need like this field. So it's like a lot of wires just for these two, just for these two channels, like a write address and data. It takes almost around like 200 wires to implement these two channels. So now we are moving on to this idea of like a burst length and burst size. So here, let's say you can think of it this bus as like a multiple lanes, and one lane actually sends like 1 bytes of data. Then let's say we have like if we send like 8 bytes at a time, then it's like we have like 8 lanes. So on-chip bus is like to make an analogy. On-chip bus is like road with like a multiple lanes. So there can be like multiple cars can run at the same time. So things like this. So you actually have like multiple lanes here. Because we have like 4 lanes per each. We can actually send like this 4 cars can actually move at the same time. They can move together. So this like 8 lanes, because we have like 8 lanes in this example, we can send like 8 bytes at a time. Okay. So this one is kind of silly analogy, but it's kind of So we have like 8 lanes, and we can actually send like 8 cars at the same time. So likewise, on like an on-chip bus, we can actually send like 8 bytes at a time, and this is, let's say this is MSB, the most significant one, and this is the least significant one. So we can send, in this example, we send like 4 8-byte data are transferred. The total amount data is like 32, because like a single box is just 1 byte, right? We actually send like 8 bytes at a time, and we repeat that for like 4 times. Right? So total amount of data we send is like 32 bytes in this example. And here comes the idea of burst length and data size. Burst size and burst length. So there are 2 like control fields, like a size and len. So size is basically specifying burst size, meaning that how many bytes you're going to send at a time. Okay, that's like a burst size. And second one is burst length. So how many times do you repeat the transfer? So in this case, the burst size is 8 byte, because we send like an 8 byte together as a unit. And then the burst length is 4, because we actually repeat this process 4 times. So it looks like this. The burst size is 8. Burst length is 4. And total number of bytes we send is 32 bytes. Okay? And there's like a specific, protocol. I mean, there's like a definition. There's like when you actually send a request, you actually specify both like burst size and burst length. And the burst size is always like 2 to the power of n. Okay, so you always send 2 to the power of n bytes of data as a unit. The burst size is always either 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. So you actually have like 3 bits to specify the unit of transfer. And the second field is burst length, how many transfers you're going to make for like a single transaction. So in this case, you can choose somewhere between 1 and 16. Okay, so the longest like transfer, like a longest like a transaction, it takes like 128 by 16. It's a very long transaction, right? So it's like 2 kilobytes. Okay. And as I said, there are 3 different like burst type. So fixed, incrementing, and wraparound. Okay. So there are 3 burst types. I already explained what they are. The fixed one is basically you keep accessing the same like address. And second one is like incrementing. Basically, you keep incrementing this like address internally so that you access like a consecutive like a range of bytes. And the final one is like a wraparound. So you start from specific address and you basically wrap around when you actually reach the boundary of the block. Okay. So here I'm going to show you a bunch of like examples of how this burst size and burst length play together. So here, let's say the burst size is 011, which is, which includes like 8 bytes, and burst length is, 0001, which is like 2 data. So in this case, we receive 16 bytes total because the burst size is 8 bytes and the burst length is 2. So 8 by 2 is like 16 bytes. Okay, so size is 8 and length is 2. So the total number of bytes for this transaction is like a 16. The next one, another combination could be, burst size is 010, which means like a 4 byte transfer, and the length is like a 00, which is like 1 data. Then we simply send like make one transfer with like a 4 bytes in it. Again, this one size is 4 and length is 1. That's simple. And so there's some like a narrow transfer. Basically you can actually do some like a narrow transfer, meaning that you can in this specific example, let's take a look. So this one is by the way, this is the byte like lane mapping. So in this case, if you have like a 64 bits in your bus, then the lowest the LSB is byte 0. The MSCB is byte 7. Okay, so there's like a numbering, this byte encoding. So let's just say you want us to do some like a narrow transfer. In this specific example, the burst actually has 5 transfer, meaning that the burst length is 5. So burst length is 5, and each transfer is 8 bits, meaning that burst size is 1 byte, right? And burst length is 5. So in total, you send just like 5 bytes, right? That's just like a transaction. And the starting address is 0. Then the transfers are made on like a 32-bit bus. So that means if you have like a bus with like a 32 bits, then you can actually send like up to like 4 bytes at a time because your bus width is 32 bits. So this one's like 4 bytes, right? So in this example, in the first transfer, you first send the address 0, and in the next cycle, you send the like address like 1, and then in the next cycle you send address 2. In the next cycle you send address 3. In the next cycle you send address 4 in the LSB part of the bus. Okay, so this one is basically time. And this one is basically the bus. And this one is LSB, and this is MSB. Like this. Okay, so this one is called narrow transfer because you only make use of very small subset of the entire bus, right, at any given time. So this is called narrow transfer. In contrast, the wide transfer is basically you fully utilize the bus, right, and that's called wide transfer. So here is another example. Let's say we send and receive data. Let's say it could be, in this case, let's say it's like a read transaction. The size is 010, which is like a 4 bytes. And length is like 0001, which is 2 data. So in this case, the size is 4 bytes. And transfer length is, the burst length is 2. So you actually send like this data twice. Like this. But then note that even though you actually use this, in the first transfer you use 4 LSBs. In the second transfer you use like 4 MSBs, right? Because so there's like a fixed mapping between address and specific like segment of the bus. Okay, because let's say your address. Address was, let's say, 1008. Let's say the starting address was 1008. Then this 1008 will be placed here. 1008. This one is 1009, 1000A, 1000E, 1000C, 1000B, 1000E, 1000F, like this, in byte address. Okay? So, so there's like a fixed, if you actually have something like a byte address, then that byte will be always transferred in a specific like a byte location in the bus. Okay? So that's the reason why the first 4 bytes are placed in the lower 4 bytes of the bus, and the second one will be placed in the upper 4 bytes of the bus, instead of like doing something like this. In the second transfer, we don't like do this. Right? So this like address range will be mapped to the upper half of the bus. Likewise, if you actually have like a 3 send or receive like 3 pieces of data, then the first again, this is like burst size is 4. Then the first like a transfer will be made on the LSB part of the bus, and second one on the MSB part of the bus, and the third one will be again like LSB part of the bus. Okay. So size is 4, and length is 3. And this is another example of narrow transfer. The burst size is 1, and burst length is 2. So we only just receive like 2 bytes in this transaction. So you can actually do this. And also, another example of narrow transfer. Now you actually receive like 4 bytes instead of like 2. So but it takes like 4 cycles to receive all of this like 4 bytes in the transaction. The size is 1, and length is 4. This is called narrow transfer because we only make use of like a subset of this like wires in the bus at any given time. In contrast, there can be like a wide transfer like this. So in the wide transfer, we fully utilize this bus. In this specific example, the burst size is 8 bytes. And burst length is 4, so we end up receiving like a 32 bytes in total. So, and then this compares like a wide and narrow transfer. This red one shows narrow transfer, and the blue one shows wide transfer, with the same like burst length. So in the wide transfer, we fully utilize this bus, but in narrow transfer, we only use a very small subset of the bus. And the next one is like an aligned transfer and unaligned transfer. So aligned transfer means, let's say this is a starting address. So if your like a starting address is divisible by the width of the bus, in this case, this one actually is an 8-byte bus, right? So if your address is divisible, the modulo is 0, the remainder is 0. If this one is divisible by this 8, then this one is called like a aligned transfer. So in this case, this first byte will be placed in the LSB, and this the other score goes up like this. This one is called like aligned transfer. So if this one, the address is divisible by bus width, then this one is called an aligned transfer. So, and then this bus is fully utilized. But there can be also like an unaligned transfer. This is not very usual, but it can happen. So in this case, this address, so our burst actually starts from address 001. So in this case, this one is not really divisible by the bus width, which is 8. So it's not divisible, then we actually don't have data for this guy, right? So we end up like receiving like 31 bytes instead of 32 because the first slot is underutilized because we start from like a non-zero location. In this case, this location is the first one. So we end up receiving like a 31 bytes instead of 32. In case if you do like some unaligned transfer. Any questions about this burst bus, like a burst bus transaction? 네, 그냥 이것만 바꾸고 그냥 끝나는 거예요. 네. 보통은 이제 어떻게 되냐면은 이렇게 해가지고 만약에 값을 결국 어디에 쓰게 되잖아요. 쓰게 되면 어떻게 되냐면 보통 이런 경우에는 그 각각의 이 바이트별로 마스크 bit이 있어요. 마스크 bit이 있으면 어떻게 되냐면 예를 들면 그러니까 8개의 지금 바이트가 있으니까 그럼 8개의 bit이 있겠죠? 그러면 지금 LSB만 0이고 나머지 bit은 밸리드하니까 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1이란 마스크 bit이 있어가지고 실제로 예를 들면 플립플롭 아니 레지스터 같은 데 라이트를 할 때 LSB는 업데이트가 안 되는 거죠. 걔는 그냥 업데이트가 안 되고 나머지 애들만 업데이트가 되는 거예요. 그런 식으로. 네, 네로우 트랜스퍼는 그냥 뭐 대단한 게 아니고요. 이건 그냥 버스트 랭스 자체가 버스트 사이즈가 버스 위드보다 작을 때 이게 되게 버스를 다 풀리 유틸라이즈를 못 하잖아요. 왜냐면 버스트 사이즈가 만약에 이 경우라면 8보다 작을 때 4나 2나 1이면은 한 번 트랜스퍼를 할 때마다 그냥 이 버스를 다 풀리 유틸라이즈 안 하고 이 경우는 버스트 위드가 1일 때죠. 빨간색일 때는. 그죠? 1일 때니까 이제 버스를 풀리 유틸라이즈 못하는 케이스인데 그런 애들을 그냥 네로우 트랜스퍼라고 부르고요. 왜냐하면 되게 한 번에 보내는 데이터 양이 되게 적은데 뭐 그건 버스 랭스는 길 수도 있고 짧을 수도 있지만 어쨌거나 한 번에 보내는 양이 이렇게 와이드하게 한꺼번에 버스를 다 써가지고 보내는 게 아니라 버스의 일부분만 이렇게 써가지고 보내니까 그걸 네로우 트랜스퍼라고 부르는 거고 만약에 이거 버스에 한 번 보낼 때 그거를 버스를 다 활용하게 되면 그거는 와이드 트랜스퍼라고 부르는 거죠. 네. 어디? 여기요? 네. 네. LSB부터 보내고 MSB부터 보내는 건 아니고요. 이 경우는 지금 예를 들면은 얘가 지금 어드레스가 1008이라는 어드레스부터 시작을 하게 되면 그죠? 그러면은 이건 사실 얼라인드 트랜스퍼죠. 왜냐면 이 지금 어드레스가 지금 버스 비스로 나눠줄 수 있는 숫자니까 얼라인드 트랜스퍼니까 이 밑에 0번지부터 시작하겠죠. 그러니까 여기서부터 0부터 시작하는데 그러면 첫 번째 트랜스퍼는 1008부터 시작하는 4개의 바이트를 보낼 거고 두 번째 트랜스퍼는 그 다음부터 4개 바이트를 보낼 거고 그 다음 사이클은 또다시 이제 4개의 바이트를 보내겠죠. 만약에 이게 벌스 랭크 3이라면 이 경우는 벌스 랭크 2지만 그죠? 그래서 이 경우는 이렇게 되고 만약에 벌스 랭크 3으로 증가하게 되면 그 다음 4개의 바이트는 요 밑에서 보낸다는 거죠. 여기서. 왜요? 시간이 이쪽이 먼저예요. 이게 헷갈리게 돼 있는데 아까 차 이그젬플에서는 이게 앞쪽으로 나가는 것 같은데 이쪽이 먼저로 보이잖아요. 여기서부터 이거 먼저 보내고 그 다음 두 번째 그래서 헷갈리게 돼 있죠. 그렇게 세팅을 했으니까 무슨 이유인지는 이제 그 IP가 이제 실제로 그 IP가 뭔가 그런 용도가 있는 경우겠죠. 어떤 경우냐면 이런 경우겠죠. 그대로 보는 이유가 예를 들면 그 어떤 IP에 데이터 패스가 32바이트인 경우. 근데 이 경우는 지금 버스가 64바이트잖아요. 버스는 64바이트인데 그 IP 블럭 안에 있는 데이터 패스는 32바이트다. 32비트, 그러니까 4바이트다. 그러면은 얘가 한꺼번에 64바이트 받을 수가 없잖아요. 네. 네네네. 그 이유가 뭐냐면 보통은 그 메모리 스트럭처가 이렇게 있으면은 보통은 이게 어떻게 들어가냐면은 이렇게 이건 이제 64비트 버스죠. 64비트 버스가 있으면은 보통 바이트에 따라서 그 데이터 패스에서 와이어를 차지하는 위치가 정해져 있어요. 그러니까 무슨 얘기냐면은 예를 들어서 64비트 어떤 데이터 패스가 있다고 치면은 항상 8로 나눴을 때 0으로 그러니까 나머지가 0인 바이트는 항상 LSB의 플레이스가 되고 그죠? 제일 로이스트 8비트의 플레이스가 되고 만약 어떤 바이트 어드레스를 8로 나눴을 때 나머지가 1인 애들은 그 다음 8비트의 플레이스가 되고 그걸 또 나누면은 또 2인 경우는 그 다음 8비트의 플레이스가 되고 이런 식으로 그 바이트 어드레스에 따라서 어떤 데이터 패스에 어떤 바이트에 플레이스가 되는지가 보통 정해져 있거든요. 그러니까 예를 들면 이런 거겠죠. CPU에서 우리가 그 64비트 레지스터가 있는데 64비트 레지스터가 있는데 예를 들면 어드레스가 뭐 7이다. 7인에는 보통 이제 어드레스가 0부터 8 로드 명령어를 실행하거나 뭔가 실행해가지고 읽어올 때 7이면 항상 MSB 쪽에 있을 거 아니에요. 0이 만약에 LSB라고 하면 그죠? 그러니까 그거를 만약에 하나씩 예를 들면 읽어온다고 해도 결국은 걔는 마지막에 자기의 그 워드 안에서의 로케이션은 항상 거기라는 거죠. 그래서 그거에 맞춰가지고 그 어드레스에 따라가지고 그 메인으로만 오게 만드는 거죠. 또 뭐 다르게 설명하면은 그렇죠. 그러니까 그 바이트 로케이션, 그러니까 워드 어떤 그 이 8바이트 안에서의 바이트 로케이션이 그 데이터 패스에 있는 어떤 그 서브셋의 와이어에 이게 항상 실리게 되는지가 대개는 서로 매핑이 그냥 돼 있다는 거예요. 그러니까 어드레스가 이렇게 있으면은 그 어드레스에 따라서 바이트 어드레스에 따라서 IP 안에 있는 버스의 그 특정한 로케이션과 서로 매핑이 돼 있다는 거죠. 그래서 이게 이렇게 돼 있는 거고, 만약에 이거를 매번 읽을 때마다 아까 그 이그젬플로 다시 한번 설명해 볼까요? 그럼 예를 들어서 이거의 경우이긴 한데요. 예를 들면은 뭐 이렇게 설명이 될지는 모르겠지만 한번 이렇게 한번 해볼게요. 예를 들면 버스가 지금은 64비트로 되어 있지만 32비트 버스가 있다고 해보세요. 4바이트가 오겠죠. 근데 IP의 데이터 패스는 64비트예요. 64비트 데이터 패스. 그러면은 여기에서 데이터를 읽어올 때 만약 64비트 데이터를 한 번에 읽어오려고 그러면 두 번 트랜스퍼를 해야 될 거 아니에요. 왜냐면 한 번에 읽어올 때 버스 비스가 4바이트니까. 그러니까 처음에 읽어올 때 예를 들면 LSB 4가 올라오고 그다음에 두 번째 읽어올 때 MSB 4바이트가 올라오겠죠. 결국은 내부적으로 그걸 받아가지고 데이터 패스 안에서는 그거를 두 개의 원래 64비트 그 데이터로 리커버를 해야 될 거잖아요. 그러니까 만약에 이게 그게 아니라 우리가 만약 64비트 버스라고 칩시다. 근데 32비트 버스일 때는 이거 어떻게 하냐면 LSB 4비트 읽어오고 MSB 4비트 읽어가지고 대신 어떻게 하냐면 두 번째 MSB를 읽어왔을 때 얘를 위쪽에다가 올려줘야 되겠죠. 쉬프트 해줘야 되겠죠. 왜냐면 그냥 원래 이렇게 32비트로 왔지만 결국 얘의 로케이션은 위쪽 4바이트니까. 그죠? 이렇게 해서 쉬프트를 하게 되는데 만약에 이게 지금 64비트 데이터베이스 레지스터가 이렇게 있다고 치자고요. 그럼 여기 있는 64비트 데이터를 여기 레지스터에 집어넣어야 되는데 만약에 여기에서 지금 64비트인데 우리가 이거를 무슨 사연인지 모르겠으나 이렇게 두 개로 나눠가지고 읽어온다고 했을 때 만약에 얘를 이렇게 로케이션하면 그냥 여기에 있는 걸 그대로 그냥 레지스터에 써버리면 되잖아요. 근데 만약에 이거를 아까 밑에다가 가져와서 이렇게 여기에서 만약에 두 번 이렇게 읽어온다고 하면 얘를 아까 얘기한 대로 다시 이쪽으로 쉬프트 해줘야 되잖아요. 64에서 이쪽으로. 그죠? 그래서 이렇게 생기는 이그젬플 중에 하나는 예를 들면 데이터를 보내는 쪽이 데이터 패스가 32비트인데 받는 쪽은 64비트다. 그죠? 그럼 얘는 한 번에 보낼 때 32비트씩 보내는데 얘는 사실 64비트씩 받아야 된다는 거죠. 근데 얘가 보낼 때 이렇게 해서 자기 로케이션대로 맞춰서 보내주면 그러면은 얘는 그냥 그대로 그 위치에서 바로 그냥 데이터 패스를 써주면 되잖아요. 카피해주면. 근데 그게 아니라 만약에 이거를 아까 얘기한 대로 학생이 제안한 대로 이렇게 32비트 밑에 있는 쪽에다 계속 온라인대가 그러니까 밑에다 이렇게 해가지고 보내주면은 이거를 다시 원래 로케이션대로 뭔가 리커버 해줘야 되잖아요. 쓸 때, 레지스터에 쓸 때. 그러니까 그런 것들을 방지하기 위해서 이렇게 원래 자기 로케이션에다가 올려서 보내주는 거죠. 오케이? 네. 설명이 되셨기를. Okay, so let's move on. So here, I already explained this thing. What's burst, and we actually have like different burst types: fixed, incrementing, or wraparound. So the benefit of this like a split transaction. Split transaction is basically this request and reply do not have to come back to back. There can be some like arbitrary interleaving between the two. Then the benefit is like you can support like a multiple outstanding request. So, instead of waiting for the first request to be finished, you can actually start like a second request immediately, without waiting for the first one to be finished. That's the main point of this split transaction. So in this way, you can actually support multiple outstanding requests. So service like a multiple requests in an overlapped manner, which actually improves the utilization of the resource. So if you want to support like a multiple outstanding requests, there are a couple of parameters that affect how many transactions can be outstanding at most. The master interface must have some like issuing capability. So master generates, there's some like a maximum number of requests a single like a master can generate at the same time. And secondly, there's like a slave interface, what is called acceptance capability, specifies how many outstanding requests can a slave can receive at the same time. So these two actually parameter determine how many outstanding requests can be there at maximum. So in this specific case, we actually have like at this point of time, we have like 3 outstanding requests, right? Because before at this point of time, the first request is finished, right? But before the first request is finished, the second and third requests were actually provided to the slave. So that's like multiple outstanding requests because without waiting for this first one to be finished, the second one and third one can be issued to the system. Okay? 그러니까 아무래도 그 멀티플 아웃스탠딩 리퀘스트를 내게 되면 유틸라이제이션이 좋아져요. 왜냐하면 얘가 보시는 것처럼 굉장히 이게 데이터가 백투백으로 덴스하게 오잖아요. 이쪽에 유틸라이제이션이 좋겠죠. 근데 그게 아니라 만약에 멀티플 아웃스탠딩 리퀘스트 서포트를 못한다고 하면 얘가 다 끝난 다음에야 두 번째 리퀘스트 여기서 낼 수 있잖아요. 그럼 두 번째 리퀘스트를 내면 그 다음에 또 딜레이 한 다음에 여기 또 나오겠죠. 그럼 여기에 뭔가 비어있는 공간이 생기겠죠. 그 버스에. 그러니까 그런 경우에는 어떻게 보면 유틸라이제이션이 떨어지는 거고 대신 우리가 저렇게 리퀘스트를 멀티플 아웃스탠딩 리퀘스트 서포트할 수 있으면 한꺼번에 리퀘스트를 계속 쭉 내주면은 그럼 이 뒤에 있는 버스가 계속 워커가 계속 부지런히 일하겠죠. 왜냐면 일이 쌓여 있으니까. 여러분들도 공부를 해보면 알겠지만 그러니까 뭐 비즈니스를 운영해 보시거나 하시면 아시겠지만 원래 항상 일이 쌓여 있어야지 유틸라이제이션이 높잖아요. 일이 좀 쌓여 있어야지 뭔가 그게 사실은 레이지 한 워크에 어떻게 보면 좀 베네핏이기도 하죠. 레이지하게 일한다는 거는 일을 쌓아놓는다는 거잖아요. 그죠? 일을 쌓아놨다가 한꺼번에 벌스티하게 다 실행하면은 아무래도 그 기간 동안 유틸라이제이션이 되게 좋겠죠. 그 자기의. 근데 만약에 일이 올 때마다 만약에 바로바로 해버리면 어떨 때는 일이 쌓여있지 않은 기간이 있잖아요. 그때도 그냥 대기하고 있으면 아무 유틸라이제이션 떨어지고 궤변인데 어쨌거나 컴퓨터 시스템에서는 확실히 사실이에요. 컴퓨터 시스템 설계할 때는 쉽게 말하면은 앞에서 일을 뿌리는 애가 일을 잘 뿌려줘야 돼요. 그러니까 예를 들면 워커 앞에서 이제 워크를 크리에이션하고 이렇게 디스패치해준 워크를 크리에이션하는 애가 있고 그걸 실행하는 애가 있다고 치면은 워커가 있고 마스터가 있다고 치면은 마스터가 얼마나 일을 빠르게 부지런히 만들어주냐에 따라서 뒤에 있는 워커들의 유틸라이제이션이 달라져요. 그래서 항상 마스터가 일을 잘 뿌려줘야 뒤에 있는 그 워커들의 유틸라이제이션이 높아지는 건 되게 중요한 성질이고 그런 거나 마찬가지로 여기서 어떻게 보면 이 어드레스 리퀘스트가 마스터라고 볼 수 있죠. 마스터가 이제 일을 빨리빨리 뿌려줘야지 그 뒤에 있는 마스터들이 놀지 않고 계속 fully utilize 되는 거죠. 네. 교수가 숙제를 빨리빨리 내줘야지 학생들이 놀지 않고 되게 그런 거겠죠. 네, 되게 열심히 공부를 하겠죠. 비슷한 건데. 네. Anyway, so this split transaction is very important for this what is called non-blocking cache. So non-blocking cache, that actually reduce the number of stall cycles on misses. This one actually, if you have there's like a blocking cache and non-blocking cache. In like a blocking cache, whenever you have a cache miss, your system stops until this request is serviced from the memory. Okay, that's like called blocking cache. So because it completely blocks your system, and in contrast, non-blocking cache is even if there's like an outstanding cache miss, let's say you have cache miss, then the request is being serviced by the DRAM or like a low-level hierarchy. At the same time, the pipeline is still going on. That's called like a non-blocking cache. You can also service like a hit, cache hits. So this one is like an example. That's a CPU, and there's a cache with MSHR. MSHR is a miss state handling register, by the way. Miss status handling register. So this one actually basically keeps a log of all the outstanding cache misses. If there's a multiple like a cache misses. So let's say, here is a scenario when this like a multiple, outstanding misses can help. So let's say, CPU requests a read from the cache at address 100. Then let's say it was cache miss, right? Then this cache actually requests for the request to memory or L2 or L3 cache, and maybe it takes like 100 cycles, long time. Then if this is a blocking cache, then the CPU is blocked, right? Because the cache is blocked, right? But in like a non-blocking cache, so the CPU can continue to work. So in this case, it requests like a 200, like address 200 from the cache. Maybe in this case, maybe this one actually calls a cache hit. Then you can read the value from the cache and continue, right? So read the hit, so send data back to CPU, and CPU keeps running. So eventually, this one actually improves the utilization of the pipeline, the CPU. And after like 100 cycle, eventually this like a request comes back, and then this data will be provided to the CPU. Okay. So in a sense, this one does like out of order execution because the first request is being serviced, and the later like instruction actually continue to execute. So it's kind of assuming like out of order execution of the CPU. So once this like this cache data comes back, then CPU actually wakes up to actually execute this like a specific like a load instruction again, and then it's followed by the dependent instructions. Okay. So here, this one is again the same scenario. We have like CPU plus cache connected to the bus and memory controller, and when if you have a cache miss, so this was the previous one. Let's say you try to load from the address 100 to register R1, and then this request will go to the main memory and comes back in like 40 to 50 DRAM cycle. Miss penalty was 40 to 50, but if you actually have like multiple outstanding requests, then now you can also do. In the previous scenario, we assume like a hit under miss, meaning that let's say you have a cache miss, and then the second request comes in and there was cache hit, then the second one actually continue to execute, right? So that's called like a hit under miss. But now this one is like, again, this one is different. This is a multiple miss under miss, meaning that let's say the first request actually caused a cache miss, right? Then the request actually goes to the main memory, and maybe the second request comes in, and second one also misses in the cache, right? So the second request also goes to the cache, goes to the memory controller, and third one, fourth one, keep going on. So in this case, there are 4 outstanding cache misses, right? Because there are 4 requests being serviced by the memory system, right? So this one is like a miss under miss, because because we are using a non-blocking cache, even though the cache miss, there's another cache miss, that can be serviced in an overlapped manner. So all of these like requests will be serviced in an overlapped manner, so that it effectively reduces the cache miss like latency for for individual cache misses. So here, first one, second one, third one, fourth one comes in. So if like there's no overlapping, if there were no overlapping, let's say this one is requested at time 0, and this one will come back at like a time 100. Let's say it takes like a 100 cycles. Then it takes like if there's no like overlapping, the cache miss will be like this. The first cache miss will take like a 100 cycle from here to here, and second request will take another 100 cycle from here to here. Third request will be serviced like takes like another 100 cycle from here to here, and fourth one here to here. If there's no like multiple outstanding requests. But in this case, if you allow like a multiple outstanding misses, then let's say this is time. If you have like multiple outstanding misses, the timeline will look like this: the first one, second one, third one, fourth one, like this. So overall, this one actually comes back at time 400, and this one may come back in somewhere like T180, right? Because we can now overlap the latency of the multiple cache misses, so that this one actually hide some of this the penalty of the cache miss. So effective miss penalty becomes less than 400 cycles. In the previous in like blocking caches, this one will be the effective miss penalty will be 400 for the 4 cache misses. But in this case, the cache miss penalty is just like 180 instead of 400 for the 4 requests. Okay. And the next one is about like a line fill buffer in the cache. So line fill buffer is like a separate buffer when there's cache miss. Okay, so it's like you can think of it as like a temporary buffer to read some value from the lower level of the cache. So let's say you have a cache miss here. So you try to access the cache at address 100, but now you actually have a cache miss on address 100. Then you actually, of course, you send the request to the memory, and the request comes back from the lower level cache or memory. Then you start to fill in this data into the line fill buffer instead of like putting it directly to the cache. So and then so you read the cache line, and you multiple words coming in, and you fill it in one by one, and to receive the data, and then this value, the cache block will be copied when the next cache miss happens. Okay, so you actually have cache. You first transfer data from the low level memory system or cache to the cache fill buffer first, and then if there's another cache miss, then eventually this one will be copied over to the cache location like this.